joining us now, former Downing Street Director of Communications, Guto Harri. Guto, good morning. Welcome to Talk today. So much to ask you about, but we've been doing this all morning. We've taken Lord Marland, we've had a Liberal Democrat, Norman Baker. We've spoken to David Davis. What was your take on Rishi Sunak's speech yesterday? Was it an assured pitch to grasp, you know, the Tory party and get it to election victory? Was it the desperate words of a man who knows his time's running out?
We certainly got to know Rishi Sunak a lot better. I used to sit opposite him at a table in the study at Downing Street, you know, day after day for about 6-7 months last year. But for the rest of the population, it takes a little while. And he did show quite a bit of himself. And I think that was sort of positive. He's also got us talking. He's got us talking very, very animatedly, if you like, about specific policies. And that has got to be a good thing compared to where he was, I think, for most of the last year. Whether we like what he's offered, there is certainly an element of a gamble there. And whether it's credible to say that he's a candidate of change, where so far, at least, most of the things he's done is abandoning long-term decisions rather than taking new long-term decisions, that also implies this is a work in progress.
And there was nothing really on his 5 key pledges that he's made in the past 12 months. Nothing really on the cost of living crisis, the housing crisis, and yet, you know, what? Oh, it's brand new information to everybody that smoking is bad. It just didn't seem like a very inspired policy change to me.
I think you've put your finger on something there. I think for most of us, we've seen industrial action across many sectors. We struggle to see our GP. We struggle even more to get operated upon. Some of us feel the streets are not particularly safe. So it felt like sort of fairly marginal issues. Even HS2, but HS2 and its symbolism for a lot of people was a sign that Britain does have aspirations to be in a better place by the end of the decade than we're in now. And on that one, he's pulled the plug. Now, it may be terribly clever politics, I don't know, where all that money will be allocated specifically to different areas, and they will be broken down into constituencies, and they'll say, this is what you get because we've dumped HS2. That might work. But I think a lot of people at the moment are wondering, are they really going to spend that money? Are they really going to do anything? Or they've just pulled the plug on one of the few things that Britain was doing that was going to enable us to have the kind of railway that most other developed nations have.
It's interesting you say, Guto, you say terribly clever politics. I've gone on about this for the last year. It was pretty obvious to me that he wanted the job. I think he thought his political career was over when the leftists got elected, but he stayed tough and got the job. I think it's very difficult. You started this by talking about, you know, repositioning. He's basically trashed an awful lot that the British public voted for, like it or not, in 2019. But he doesn't have that long to put his stamp on anything fresh, because we know, you worked in Downing Street, things don't happen that quickly. And I almost feel like he's stuck somehow, in my mind, between a rock and a hard place, mate. Do you know what I mean?
I know exactly what you mean, and it's very hard. You pull levers, and it feels at the heart of government that they're not attached to anything. So it takes an awful long time to get things going, and that's why I think a lot of people, particularly former prime ministers, are so depressed at the idea of pulling HS2, because you don't get that kind of thing off the ground very easily. And once it is, you are on a course towards something tangible at the end. I remember when I went for Boris Johnson in City Hall, there was talk of pulling the Olympics because it was a financial crisis. Imagine if we'd done that. There was talk of pulling Crossrail. Well, if you ride the Elizabeth line in London now, you think that would have been a mad thing to do. And I fear that's the danger with HS2. We'll wonder in 5, 6, 7 years' time, in a decade, what were the big decisions that they took back then that have changed the dynamics now? And if what we're getting is a saving on bus fares this year, but not getting a state-of-the-art railway in a decade, that's not a good long-term decision.
Guto, I've got to ask you, rumours have been circulating that Dominic Cummings himself is back in the picture and advising Rishi Sunak. One insider's characterised Cummings' advice as, and I quote, "Do mental stuff that proves you're not the establishment."
Brilliant.
Any comment?
I think he's one of the most toxic and obnoxious and damaging characters that has ever been anywhere near our public life. And if Rishi Sunak, who is an intelligent, thoughtful, hardworking, clean-living man, is mad enough to bring him anywhere near Downing Street, then he's not the man I think he is. I'd be very, very surprised. Some of the people around him may talk to Dominic Cummings, but they do very well to think who would be probably #1 hate figure not least for treating us with the contempt that we needed to allow him to drive 100 miles to prove that his eyesight worked. I mean, literally couldn't make it up about this man. We're better off without him in public life, and Rishi Sunak is definitely better off without him anywhere near the Conservative Party in the next election.
Couldn't agree more, but I have to ask you this, Guto. You know what's coming, because I can tell by your face. A toxic and damaging individual with no character who should be nowhere near public life. You went to work for the very man for 6 months to try and save his bacon, by all accounts, who staked his political career on Dominic Cummings. How mad were those last 6 months? I've got to ask you.
The last 6 months were tough, but he wasn't there. So there was a very professional team brought in, a fantastic chief of staff in Steve Barclay, a number of wonderful women who came into Downing Street, a new head of the policy unit. We actually, I think, given a bit more time, were getting things back on track. The early times, I think Dominic Cummings set out to literally offend as many people as he could. And shame on Boris for sort of trusting him as much. I think you can rest assured that he regrets that decision profoundly now. Boris himself, of course, very different character. 14 million people voted very enthusiastically at the last election, many of them in constituencies that had never before even contemplated voting Conservative. And they are wondering what happened to the guy that they put their trust in, taken out by his own party. That's another dynamic of the next election that's going to be quite hard. And the more you trash the person that people voted for at the last election, if that is to be an ongoing strategy, then that's high risk too.
I completely agree. And whatever your political persuasion or side, Boris Johnson won an 80-seat majority. And one of my things about Rishi Sunak is you can be as forceful, as forward-thinking as you want. You're there on somebody else's mandate, mate. And that's his issue. Guto, I've got to ask you one final question. From what you said, if Steve Barclay, you and these wonderful women were in 10 Downing Street, Boris Johnson would still be in power, yes or no?
I think if just a couple of hiccups at the end of a long, relentless line of attack over Partygate, if we just made it to the summer, I think he might still be there in the polls. Well, you saw what happened to the polls when he was taken out. They didn't narrow. They opened up massively.
I just want to challenge that
because
I don't think you can categorise it, you know, the promotion or the employment of Chris Pincher, the fact that Boris seemed to completely skim over the fact that this man had been accused of what he'd been accused of as simply
shouldn't have been in power. Shouldn't have had it. Absolutely. No. Guto, fantastic. Be on regularly. How good was he?
I love Guto Harri.
I love the description of Dominic Cummings. You're a legend. Guto Harri, thank you very much indeed.